House 210. We'll start with introductions. Mr. Boland.
Daniel Boland.
Mark Littlefield.
Karen Bronga.
Scott Meyer.
Anna Brawley.
Mike Zalatel. Mr. Johnson, are you on the phone? Oh, okay. Still muted.
Unmuted.
Mr. Johnson, are you on the phone?
I'm here.
All right, great. And hi,
Mr. Martinez is
all right. Hi, Mr. Martinez. You know what? It's 2:11. It's Friday afternoon. Please use first names. I am tired. So let that set the stage. All right. With that, I'm going to start today's work session by turning this over to the administration to kind of tell us where we are with this particular resolution, and then hoping we can work on a process conversation from there. So with that, Ms. Browse, would you like to introduce yourself for the record and take it away?
Through the chair, Ona Browse, Acting Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss this with you. We have an alternative proposal for the AR 2024-232 that this work session was called to discuss. In that resolution, the appropriation of $890,000 of excess ARPA funding that was originally awarded to UAA has been returned to the municipality because their project has completed. And in order to bridge the operational funding gap for the shelter at 56th Avenue while we wait for the DCCED grant to come through, at the time when this document was introduced, the reappropriation of those ARPA funds was the available source of funding. Based on member comments, Mayor LaFrance asked us to look into if there were other options that might cover that funding. And we were able to make the determination that given the current state of the paperwork with the DCCED grant and the fact that it is likely to be finished very shortly and be followed with a check from the state or the opportunity to get reimbursement for those funds, the potential alternative option is to move the first quarter budget amendment that this body approved for cold weather sheltering in the amount of $756,000 that exists in the health department budget right now, to allocate that for the bridge funding and wait until the state grant comes in and just complete the funding throughout the rest of the year. So this $890,000 appropriation from UAA, we would ask the body to postpone indefinitely, and we would plan to bring a larger ARPA conversation to you a little bit later in the year with more detailed information about all of the potential remaining funds.
Great. Are there any questions about the AR before we shift to the larger process conversation around ARPA and what their plan is? As you know, I'm not going to participate in that conversation, but I will help get you all through the queue and to the administration. Daniel.
So let me just summarize back to make sure I understand a little bit more simply. There's a state grant, the DCCED. I don't know what that stands for, but that eventually we think is going to come from the state to be used for emergency cold weather shelter so that we don't have to use the UAA money. In the meantime, there's just a pool of funding at the health department to bridge that so that while we wait, we can keep the cold weather shelter going with the hope that that will be reimbursed as part of that state grant. Okay, great. And then the administration, the 890,000, whatever it is from the UAA that they don't need anymore, we're going to come up with a process for how we want to spend that money on whatever it is.
Through the chair to Mr. Volin, that's correct.
Okay, great.
Karen.
I appreciate that clarification because I can remember this pot of money being mentioned and ideas were supposed to be sent in. And then I was really surprised that it was being moved this way. I really think since it was allocated for workforce development, that would be an appropriate placement.
Great. We're going to dive into some of that process after we get through this first half. Anna.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just say something really briefly, and then it's mostly not related to the content of this item. So I'm going to hold most of my other comments to Tuesday when you mention that other item. But as one of the sponsors of that original amendment, I would like the administration to prepare either probably in writing and verbally in the meeting a rationale for this change, why it would be moved forward to fall, and then also the overall intent of that cold weather shelter funding was not just about the 56th Avenue shelter. And so I'll just raise that question because, again, that's not really germane to this particular item, or it's tangential. Just to make sure that we are being clear about the fact that cold weather shelter is intended to be more than just that building, and then what the plan would be to ensure that we still can start the cold weather season with the resources we need, whether it's warming centers, all those other pieces that are in addition to this particular shelter. So that's what I'll say now, and then I will hold any other comments to that other item on Tuesday. Thanks.
Through the chair to Ms. Brawley, OMB is aware of those concerns, and we are also looking at the answers to those. So any documentation that comes before the body on Tuesday will include an explanation of how we will deal with the specific allocation for code requirements on cold weather housing versus the general shelter occupancy throughout the year.
Okay, and the administration gave us heads up this morning. There'll be a late on the table item. So we look forward to seeing that. All right, anything else on the shelter conversation before we move over to ARPA writ a little bit larger? Okay, so thank you to Matt Farina, our budget analyst, and working with finance on kind of getting a spreadsheet together on the ARPA summary. I think there's some ways that we need to frame this. One is there's still an investigation going on by the administration as to what will be unspent ARPA as we move towards an encumbrance obligation deadline of the end of the year. So this is just, consider this a snapshot in time as to what we know right now. What I wanted to make sure we did today was talk through how we want to approach any ideas folks might be having around ARPA. ARPA appropriations, I think, mostly happened before we had new members join us. You are no longer new members. You have more than a year of experience, but it happened before you were here. So there were a couple of things, and I think we're in a slightly different posture with a new administration. So what I'm going to have legislative services do, we didn't get it done before now, is redistribute for you the ARPA framework we used when we made the original ARPA allocations, as well as make sure you have a full list of the projects that were funded, just to refresh everyone's memory so we can all be on the same sheet of music. And then want to work with Office of Management and Budget and Finance and Bill to make sure that if you have ideas, you can take them to the administration first as they are calculating their plan. This is how it used to work in the way back. You would take your ideas to the administration. If they agree with you, they may incorporate them in their plan. And then, of course, when they bring their plan forward, we have our legislative prerogative to make amendments and changes. Does that seem to work for everyone as a general way to approach this process? That's the kind of one of the second parts of this work session. Does that work as a process way to go about doing this? Daniel?
Let me again summarize that back so I can make sure I understand. You're asking that we go to the administration individually first, and they can collect individual priorities, and then that'll come back before the body in a work session, or what type of?
So that was the second half of this. If we agreed on that process, I was going to ask the administration, could they bring their ARPA package to us either at the September or October Budget and Finance Committee meeting, hoping for September, but willing to settle for October. Because then we would be able to see what projects were or weren't included, and then we can kick off our conversation. We would also then at that time see the administration's priorities.
Is there any thought to, because I remember so I was newly elected when we went through the second tranche of the ARPA funds. And I remember we had multiple hours long work sessions to decide what was going to be funded, who had responded asking for grant money. And there were a lot of folks that we had to turn down. So I wonder if there's any thought to resurfacing some of those organizations or projects that were not able to be supported in that process. Just throwing that out there as a thought.
We can include what we didn't fund that was requested when we do that like new level setting. So we can send out the framework we use to guide our decision, the list of what was funded and the list of what was not funded. Hopefully that would be helpful to everyone.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Okay. Anna.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I support that process. I had a conversation with OMB director yesterday along those lines. So that's my personal opinion. And the other thing that I keep reflecting on is, well, thinking back, so I was not on the body in 2022. The posture at that point was we had a whole bunch of federal money, we had a whole bunch of needs, and there was a desire to, I think, stabilize what was happening in the city. And that was really what the prior funding the CARES Act was as well, right? We were in emergency mode. And there was also, aspirational thoughts about what we could do with this money, get it out in the community. I think fast forward to now, I think obviously we do want to be aspirational. We do want to get money in the community. The way I'm looking at it though, is we also have a whole lot more information about our financial state, about issues that we've been using one-time funding for. I'll mention shelters, just one example. And really a lot of, I think newer or more clarified information about the not great financial situation that we are in, right? That we've got our audit done. It's not that we are having problems like insolvency or whatever, but we have these really big issues where we have a lot more need than we have resources. And so what I'm looking at also is, I think in addition to looking back to what the original intent was, I think it is important. And that's why I do support talking to the administration, because what I'd like to do is sort this funding into need to have and nice to have, right? And I think unfortunately we are just in that spot that we are constrained, that we will have a lot more needs. And so I also really want to manage expectation that any of this money potentially goes out the door, right, to other organizations. And I'm not saying that because I wouldn't want to see that, but I think we just have to recognize that there may be really basic internal needs. And I'll just mention briefly, and then I'm done. Chair Constant mentioned in Budget and Finance Committee meeting last month, his personal interest would be, or his priority is to see this funding or resources go toward making sure that we timely complete our 2023 audit. So, and I'm not saying that because I'm necessarily also saying that's my priority, but I just wanted to put that on the table since he's not here, as another thing that's been raised. And so again, that's where I think just looking at what all's in the mix, and then we can start negotiating out what that looks like. Again, not ceding our legislative prerogative either, but knowing that we have some pretty serious financial conversations we have to have, and this is part of that. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. I'm going to go real quick and I'll come back to you, Daniel. I think that's one of the reasons we want to bring it to the administration, any of your ideas. Also remember, we're kicking off the budget season. And that's why I want to bring this back through the Budget and Finance Committee. Maybe it's not this funding, but other funding or whatever it may be. And so I'm hoping you all tell me if this feels too fast, but if we can get our ideas to Bill and Ona by the end of the month, the 30th. We'll get that paperwork out to you by Monday that we talked about, and we can spend this month kind of going through it. You can do follow-up questions or whatever it might be and start to seed those ideas. And then hopefully they can kind of take those in and kind of give us an update where they're at with it in September. Because by October, the budget's on. So that's a thought on some timing. Of course, you still have the prerogative after the 30th to do whatever you want, but always like a good deadline. Daniel.
Thank you. So I have this clear in my head. The money that we're talking about is just like the 800,000, not more? Or are we talking about this $5 million? What are we talking about?
Through the chair to Assembly Member Boland. The quick answer is that's why we need the time to figure it out. But I will say that based on the spreadsheet that the body is using today versus the detailed information that we have from ONB and what's actually encumbered and spent, this dollar amount is not available. This $5.199 million is at a minimum, maybe a third available. If you look at the line that says Anchorage Health Department facility, that's $2.5 million budget and a 2.371 balance. The actual balance on that grant based on encumbrances and spend since this report was created, I think based on July ARPA reporting, the actual balance in the health department facility is $571,000. So the totals on this document are not accurate based on what's actually been spent and encumbered so far. So one of the things that OMB will be doing over the next couple of weeks is detailing each of those current states and whether or not the grantee intends to spend them before the end of the year or before the end of the performance period, which is July 2027. Yeah.
Okay. So that's helpful. I mean, I think we should be maybe thinking small. I don't know. It just seems to me like it's not that much money. It could go very quick. So just kind of throwing that vibe out there. I remember there was an R word that we glommed onto during that process in the ARPA funds. It was like, it was like revitalize or something. It needs to be.
That's why we're going to hand the documents back
Let's
out.
circulate that because I think that'll be helpful. But I do hear Member Brawley's point about, the real financial needs within the municipality. And that's why I think where this process for me of us approaching the administration is only like half the process. I'm curious to know, like, where are we really hurting? What would you all spend this money on tomorrow? I heard a rumor today that the traffic department is out of white paint. There's something that I want them to use that white paint for. But like, what are those needs in the various departments that this could help with? So I don't know, it might be nice to have a two-way kind of street there.
That two-way street shows up when they take in our ideas, they work through what their things are as well. We may have joint ideas. So, right, then maybe they nuance one of their ideas. This is like, so this is back for, I am like literally the only one who ever went through that. So back in the way back, that was how the budget would work. If you had an idea, you brought it to the administration would say, okay, let us see if we can't work that in, or take something we're already thinking about, right? And so I was thinking, if you have burning thoughts around whatever it might be, because we're already should be thinking about what our funding priorities are anyway, moving into the budget season, start that conversation now. This ARPA money is just in some ways a catalyst to make possibly a yes ARPA, and let's look to the budget. So that's all we're trying to do is create a flow here. I think we will see from the administration its priorities. I think they already have some probably really solid ideas that will come forward, but it'll all put us on the same page. And I'm hoping to do that by the September budget and finance if we can, so that we know where this money plays in as we go and walk through the departmental budgets and look at budget amendments through October into November.
Okay, thank you. From my own perspective, I think that the sooner that we could have some of that, for me, the more helpful, because I could come forward with 5 or 6 things I'd love to spend this money on, but I also want to support those immediate needs too. Thanks.
Okay, I thought I saw another hand. Anna?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is we need to know what this total is, right? And that's not our job to figure out, but they're going to go through their process. And then I think, really what we're talking about is a negotiation, right? A negotiation of priorities, a negotiation among us members, right? Because we all are going to have our own competing priorities, or we might support something, but we'll have thoughts about it, thoughts and feelings. And then the administration has priorities as well. And so it'll be a negotiation in that sense as well. And so I think that's really what we're talking about. And I think, the alternative to having an intentional process is we all show up and whoever got their amendment drafted first, and then it gets voted on, right? And so I think our intent as budget co-chairs as well is to re-normalize this more intentional process. Again, not giving away legislative prerogative to make those changes, and not saying that we just have to go with what the administration wants. But I think it's making the negotiation process more predictable and really more fair and more accessible for everybody.
And Mr. Gates is on the phone, but weighed in, says that we need to make sure all ideas are vetted for meeting the ARPA authorized uses criteria. So if you are uncertain, you should check in with council, or that's another great reason to share your idea with the administration, because I am sure they are tracking that. Matt.
Well, through the chair, this is Matt, the Assembly Budget Analyst. I'll just say, if you do send them ideas, also send them to me so I know it's happening, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Matt will help pair like with like and members with members if we are all thinking the same thing. All right. Anything else on kind of the plan forward? I knew it was going to be a quick work session, not quite the 5 minutes Mr. Falsey predicted this morning, but I wanted to get through the process pieces. Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
Yeah, just briefly. So I remember months ago, we've had reports on ARPA and how at that point, all of the money had been obligated and got out the door to external organizations, and there were still some department funds sitting there. And obviously we know there may be other external grantees out there that have funds to return. So that's another reason to go through this process. Is this list that we're looking at right now essentially inclusive of all those internal department things as well?
Through the chair to Member Brawley, I believe so, but I haven't had a chance to go through and confirm that they match. We have 2 separate documents that we're working from. But the intention is to go through each of the internal grantees and make sure that those expenses are either going to be spent or encumbered, and to, through a larger process, go through more of the ARPA list with remaining funds to external grantees to ask where those funds may be at the end of the year or the end of the performance period in 2027. We'll be asking a handful of questions to clarify what happens post 12/31/24 with returned funds from external grantees. Because if we have an encumbrance deadline of the end of the year, but the performance period is 2 years or a year and a half later, we will need to know what the window of time is and whether or not we have to return that cash or it becomes property of the municipality. So we'll be asking that question, a couple other questions to make sure we have that information before we come back with the ARPA recommendations.
And I'll just briefly add too, I know there's some circumstances where there's been federal money and then we have had to go, I was thinking of the Merrill Field projects from a few months ago where we had to go and basically advocate for an extension. So I think also that's another, if that comes up and then there is an issue, that's something that I imagine our city and other cities will be facing. So we can also elevate that to our advocacy. So of course we'll be in touch about that, but if we have to, we can do that. But I think our goal should be to optimize and really optimize so that we're spending that money on the things we're supposed to as quickly as possible, and that we're not leaving anything on the table.
Yeah, Karen.
The third one on the list was is there litigation over that money? Do we plan to rake any of that back?
Through the chair to Ms. Brongo, we had that conversation internally earlier today. We're going to confirm where that stands right now so that we can get the answers to those questions and what the process might be for the municipality with active lawsuits, whether or not that funding comes back into the municipality, if we are responsible to it or responsible to the Treasury for that funding at a later date because of the circumstances. But there are a handful of options to deal with that specific grantee award. We'll bring that information to you as well.
And we're working on getting a legal update executive session on the books where that would probably be the more appropriate place to dive into the details. Daniel.
I searched back in my old emails. The word was not an R word, it was a T word. And this is probably reflective of the zeitgeist of the times, but it was transformative. We were looking to make investments that were transformative.
Thank you. Well, transitional perhaps now. We can pick another T word. All right. Anything else for the good of the order for this work session? Going once, going twice. All right. It's the weekend. We're adjourned.